So this is a long rant in response to a rant you had on Monday's episode.
Okay. I'm going to pour myself some coffee here. Bring
That's
it on.
right. Get comfortable on your end. William says, at the end of the latest episode, Ben dropped some absolutely abysmal takes after correctly explaining and discussing R1. The best take on Twitter that I saw was essentially everyone sees R1 and then doubles down on their pre-existing views. Ben was no exception. When discussing why are they called OpenAI, you have to remember the context in which they were founded. There was not a new AI lab being founded every week at that point. The primary player was Google's DeepMind. Have you read the DeepMind papers? There's barely enough technical substance to do anything with. They didn't even allow external researchers to use the models at scale until AlphaFold. OpenAI was open relative to Google. And now the window for what it means to be open has moved. If you want to say...
Just want to jump in. Great point. Very, very well put. Anyhow, continue.
Okay, +1 to William. We'll see how it does in the second half. If you want to say F Anthropic or OpenAI for slowing down progress, what the hell? Where is the ire for Google? The whole reason we have any of this is because OpenAI was founded. They are the reason this stuff exists. Moreover, the take about holding back GPT-2 is also terrible. They did that to figure out what is the minimum we should do to make sure this can't be misused. They now have a process that they and Anthropic follow when rolling out new models. They produce model cards that rate CBRN risks. That's good, even if you don't think it's possible for these models to have meaningful CBRN risk. And if DeepSeek drops the weights of a model that does have high risk in one of these areas, it's useful for us to have language to discuss it. From a business perspective, from a business analyst perspective, the industry leader doesn't benefit from open source or open rates or open weights. This is part of why Google didn't open source their infrastructure the same way Facebook did. It was a strategy credit for Facebook. The same is true today. It's a strategy credit for Facebook to release their Llama models. It seems like DeepSeek is interested in open source, not from a business strategy perspective, though, so that's pretty interesting. It may be that as long as Liang Wenfeng is in control, they will release the weights to most in parentheses of their models.
Oh, wait, no, you don't need to frame it. This is first off, William, fantastic email. The rant deserved a rant, and you delivered. So very good. I already gave you credit up front for the OpenAI versus Google. Great point. To jump to the end, the business analyst perspective, yes, correct. It is. You see from the distillation bit, what's the easiest way to avoid distillation? Just get the weights, right? Mm-hmm. And I would also add on, from a DeepSeek perspective, it makes perfect business sense to do open weights and open models for the same reason it made sense for Facebook to do open infrastructure. Like and even from the counter argument to they should have kept the secret so the U.S. wouldn't know about the efficiency gains. The benefit is they did just spread this knowledge to everyone in China who is dealing with severe chip constraints. So all this bit sort of makes sense. So I actually grant almost everything sort of in this email. I will just explain the source of my rant. That was not a business analyst rant. That was did it confirm some of my takes? Yes. And my takes is it has deeply, there's this tension between using the language. There's several things going on. Using this language of safety and the world-ending possibilities of AI. My frustration is to the extent that is a real concern for you. And to be clear, I'm not flippant about this. I completely grant the concerns. And that's part of what drives my irritation. It is detrimental to your cause to expand the definition of safety to mean a large number of things which we may find objectionable, but which are not safety sort of oriented. So when it talks about and that's why I went to the GPT-2 sort of notes talking about misinformation or biases or whatever it might be. Again, those are legitimate things to have a discussion about, but the way it manifests in actual discussion is you push back against that and you're accused of not caring about the world ending. And that, that's the Mott and Bailey sort of aspect of this argument, where this is an argumentative fallacy where you go out to the Bailey and you make sort of a point. Someone objects to that, you retreat to the Mott and say, "What? You're talking about the world ending? You don't care about this?
You don't care about safety?" Yeah.
And this might be motivated by my own personal position, which is, I promise you, every time I write about this, I get a lot of pushback about me not caring about the world ending. And so there is absolutely personal frustration about this sort of conflation that happens. Number two is the overall structure of OpenAI. And I've looked for this for ages. It might have been like some conversation. I don't remember. But there is a real element of even this board structure and this idea, if you really believe that AI is going to control the world, implicit in that with this structure is we will control the world, right? Because the board's going to make the decision, and who voted for them, right? Exactly. And so there's just if you take these arguments seriously, then I have real concerns, right? And now, to the extent this the first point William made, double down their existing views. Yep, absolutely happen. One of my existing views all along is that this is, number one, if this does become dominant, I'm very worried about Sam Altman deciding the course of the world. This isn't a shot at Sam. It's a shot at any person having that degree of power, right?
I feel like that's a reasonable stance.
Yeah. Number two, I don't think that's going to happen. I think there's going to be multiple models, and the best way to, this is very cliche, I admit, but I believe it, the best way to fight against this, to defend ourselves against this, is to have more AI, not less AI. If we could go back and put this all back into Pandora's box, sure, that's fine. My belief is that we crossed that Rubicon a long time ago. It's going to be out there. It's going to be open. And R1 emphasizes that point. This is the whole basis of the chip discussion, right? It's like China's going to get this. They're going to get enough chips, and they're going to figure out how to build stuff over time. And you're fighting a losing battle that, by the way, is just the entire wrong mindset of playing defense instead of seeking to innovate, right. Which again, totally reasonable to disagree. I loved our discussion on that last time, in part because I feel like I could flip around and argue your point just as well. It's a discussion that needs to be had. But yeah, this is a prior of mine, which is that actually AIs are going to be broadly available, given that if you think that if your number one concern is truly safety, then, and you're saying we're a nonprofit, we're doing this for the good of the world, then you should be open sourcing it. Now, to his point, from a business analyst perspective, of course they should not be open sourcing it, but that means they're being big hypocrites. And if they're hypocrites, I'm gonna yell at them. So so again, I think William makes all reasonable points. That segment, again, it's a podcast. We get a little spicier on the podcast than necessarily I do on Trajectory, but that's a reaction to what I perceive as the hypocrisy in this position, that if you take a very sharp analytical edge to it, looks like trying to capture power for a very small coterie of people.
Coterie, I can read that word. I can't pronounce it either. But my question is, would open sourcing OpenAI's models and open the weights, that is, that would help because it would disperse the innovation and allow other Americans to innovate on it? Is that right?
It's like nuclear weapons and mutually assured destruction, which again, would we be better in a world with zero nuclear weapons? Well, actually, it's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, on one hand,
I was pretty annoyed by the end of Oppenheimer because they made it sound like we unleashed some horrible era on the world when, in fact, the nuclear bomb was invented and there's been more relative peace than at any time in human
history.
So.
Exactly. This is like the whole thing about the U.S.-China economies being so intertwined. This is really a bad thing. And they're like, well, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's going to actually work out, right? No, with the U.S.-China relationship is mutually assured economic destruction. There is in a conventional world with conventional weapons, with and sort of non-integrated economies to the level we are now, I think almost without question there would have already been a war over Taiwan, right? So there now the problem and the very reasonable pushback is, okay, you want to take my arguments, put back my face. You might be right in the short to medium term, but if you think about the long term, all we're doing is setting ourselves up for a truly world-ending, destructive scenario. And my response to that is, you might be right, and it's the same thing with AI.
Knock on wood, right here.
We might be right, but the problem is AI is out there. It's a real thing. It is going to be diffused, in my opinion. And given that, the answer is not to try to put it back in the box. Mm-hmm. The answer is to run in the exact opposite direction. And so, and again, from a business analyst perspective, William's totally right. OpenAI is right to close down, to not be open. Just save me all the self-righteous sort of posturing. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was responding to. That's what I was responding to, just to be clear.